Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now on our 30th episode of 2026. You know, it's been a really busy summer for the Fiber Broadband Association. A couple of weeks ago, FBA held its annual DC fly-in where our members met with 28 congressional offices to discuss key priorities. A lot of that was discussing permitting reform and a lot of things that are in flight. Following our fly-in, FBA was honored to have bipartisan, bicameral honorary co-chairs, Senator Shelley Moore Capito from West Virginia, Jackie Rosen from Nevada, and Representative Jennifer McClellan from Virginia for Fiber Day on the Hill. We hold that in the Rayburn building, and we had over 300 policymakers and congressional staff attend. You know, this is a very important event that provides an educational opportunity for Congress to explore the technology, workforce, and innovation driving the future that fiber connectivity enables. As Congress prepares to leave DC for August, one notable item on the Senate's agenda for tomorrow's Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee hearing is titled Intelligent Networks, Powering Artificial Intelligence and Transforming Communication. And that takes place at 10 a.m. tomorrow, so exactly 24 hours from now. Witnesses include Fiber Broadband Association member Bob Everson, he's Cisco's Chief Architecture, Provider Mobility. Jonathan Spalter, the President and CEO of US Telecom. Dan Watermeyer, the Commissioner of Nebraska PSC. And our good friend Assad Ramzali, who's the Director of Artificial Intelligence and Technology Policy at Vanderbilt. So that should be an interesting hearing. That hearing will reinforce key messages that Fiber Broadband Association highlighted during our fly-in and Fiber Day. And it really comes down to fiber is the foundational infrastructure that will enable America's AI future, as well as quantum and everything else happening in the future. You know, last week we were in Bozeman, Montana for our regional Fiber Connect workshop. So if you have not been to Bozeman recently, it is just a fantastic college resort town and a perfect place to be in July. Wish I was back there. Also, who would have known that Bozeman is the epicenter of quantum computing and technology? So we held our event at the Montana State University, and it was exciting to see all the amazing things that were happening with respect to research and economic development in the community. Next, we'll be in Omaha in August. Then we'll be up in Boston in September, Savannah in October, Vancouver, British Columbia in November, and we'll finish the year with our premier member meeting in Islamorada, Florida in December. Last week on Fiber Breakfast, our guest was Dave Thomas, not from Wendy's, but Dave Thomas, CEO of Eagle Resources. I say that because I went to Duke and the Dave Thomas Center was the actual Wendy's guy. But anyway, he discussed right-of-way wars, winning the fiber deployment battle. So Dave provided his expertise on dealing with railroads and gaining access to right-of-ways. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to our website, watch the replay. Today on Five for Breakfast, our guest is our good friend, Joey Wender, CEO and Executive Director of SHLB Coalition, to discuss the importance of advocating to save the E-Rate program for schools and libraries in America. What could be more America than E-Rate and schools? Joey is the Executive Director of the Schools, Health, Libraries, and Broadband, also called SHLB, a nonprofit advocacy organization dedicated to closing the digital divide by promoting high-quality broadband for community-anchored institutions. Before joining SHLB, Joey served as the director of the Capital Projects Fund, the most successful broadband program the government's ever had. I can say that with a lot of confidence from the U.S. Department of Treasury, so congratulations on that. So Joey oversaw a $10 billion program funding broadband and infrastructure in communities across the country. He previously spent 13 years on Capitol Hill, including senior policy advisor to Senator Ed Markey, where he led a team covering telecommunications and infrastructure. And earlier, he then Representative Markey's legislative director. So all that, welcome, Joey. And for audience, please type your questions to go, and I will turn things over to Mr. Wender.
Gary, first of all, thanks for having me on, and thanks for the great partnership that we've had over the years. Obviously, when I was at Treasury and now at the SHLB Coalition, you have a terrific team at the Fiber Broadband Association, and we really appreciate your partnership and friendship. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about E-Rate and preserving universal service, and then we'll have a little chat about it. So you would say, so we've talked a little bit about SHLB already. We are a nationwide advocacy organization that is committed to ensuring that all anchor institutions, that's schools, libraries, and health clinics, places that are really the heartbeats of our communities, where we learn, where we grow, where we seek care, have the connectivity they need to serve their communities. So we find ourselves here in the summer of 2026 facing many threats to the Universal Service Fund. You know, the Universal Service Fund was created 30 years ago. And I like to say it was Congress's first holistic attempt at closing the digital divide in this country. It's when the term digital divide started, right? It's when we started debating and addressing this growing concern as fiber was being laid, as infrastructure for our modern connected economy was being born. Unfortunately, there are threats to this regime, and they come in the form of 3 C's. It's the commission. When I say commission, I'm talking about the FCC, courts, as well as Congress. And so I'll go through all 3 of those here today. So the first is the commission. Unfortunately, regrettably, the commission has started a rulemaking, has voted on advanced a proposal that includes a question about whether E-Rate should be terminated. Now, people might be asking, what is the context for that? Why would Chairman Carr and the FCC even broach such a subject? Well, Chairman Carr came in and said, I want to do a top-down review of all 4 USF programs. E-Rate is but one of those 4 programs. E-Rate is the one that provides the discounts to low-income schools and libraries around the country to connect to the internet. It's a $3 billion a year program. He has started a top-down review of not just E-Rate, but also Lifeline, which is the assistance for consumers to afford mobile service, the rural healthcare program to ensure that rural residents have the connectivity they need to seek healthcare, as well as obviously the high cost program. Unfortunately, he went furthest in the E-Rate item, and he has asked whether it should be terminated or whether it should be limited to rural areas only, which are both notions that we strongly disagree with. We don't think that the commission has the authority to end the program. We also think that Congress was very explicit that it was about creating a discount for all low-income communities. It doesn't matter if you're rural or urban. If you're a community in need and you're struggling to pay your internet bills, E-Rate is there to support and help you. And so we have launched a campaign to protect E-Rate, saveourerate.com. We are asking every school and library, every concerned citizen, every parent, every ISP to step up and fill the record at the commission and say, no, we support E-Rate. This is essential OpEx ongoing funding for a program that supports nearly ubiquitous broadband connectivity around the country. You know, the vast majority, I've seen studies of over 95% of schools and libraries rely on a fiber connection to power their schools. Now imagine if this $3 billion in subsidies went away. Imagine what the implications would be as it reverberated through the economy. And so we are asking everyone to make sure you make your voice heard at the commission. You know, beyond that, the commission has taken some other damaging steps, we think, on E-Rate. They ended the Wi-Fi hotspot program. They ended the school bus Wi-Fi program. They've instituted a competitive bidding portal, which all you need to know about that is it's just going to make it harder and more burdensome for applicants to apply. I will say one bright spot, they have not canceled the cybersecurity pilot. That was a $200 million program that had over $3 billion in demand. That is ongoing. And really what I hoped, Gary, was to spend this summer talking about how do we improve and modernize E-Rate, right? How do we spend some more money on cybersecurity? How do we address the growing needs Unfortunately, the commission seems to be taking a step backwards. Turning to the courts briefly, there was also a major challenge to E-Rate and the entire Universal Service Program. A ideologically driven group called Consumers Research brought a suit. There was a circuit split, meaning different federal courts disagreed on whether it was constitutional. And luckily, we prevailed last summer in the Supreme Court. SHLB was a named party. And the basic question that was being asked was Congress specific enough in delegating authority to the FCC to set up these programs? Six justices agreed with us. And so the program is constitutional. Unfortunately, like with a lot of litigation, it's not over. And there were some smaller unresolved questions in that case. And now Consumers Research is back, and they've brought another case, this time in the Fifth Circuit. And SHLB has stepped up to the plate and is a named party, and we are again intervening. So next week, I will be in hot, sweaty New Orleans for Fifth Circuit oral arguments. Oral arguments are next Wednesday at 9 a.m. Central. And again, it's going to test whether or not this is constitutional. We think it is. We feel strong in our legal arguments, particularly given that we just won at the Supreme Court. But I want everyone to know that the fight in the courts is not over as well. Finally, Congress. I don't view Congress as a threat to USF. I view it as an opportunity. And there is a genuine desire amongst a group of bipartisan lawmakers that are chaired by a Republican from Nebraska, Senator Fisher, and a Democrat from New Mexico, Senator Lujan, to modernize, to improve USF and the programs that lie within it. We could talk about contribution reform if you want, Gary, but the whole idea is this is really important money that flows every year to our communities around the country. So instead of asking the question about terminating it or limiting it, these lawmakers have been asking, how do we make it better? And we are so supportive of all the work that they're doing. In fact, we're going to be up on the Hill today doing a briefing talking about specifically E-Rate and how it benefits every state and, in fact, every congressional district in the country. E-Rate money goes to all 435 districts. So know that there is this third dynamic here, and we hope that this is what will win in the end, is that Congress will improve and better these programs. I got to put a plug in. We have our annual conference in October, AnchorNets. I know FBA has been a great sponsor and partnership of ours, and we hope to see you at it. If you care a lot about these issues, please do come to our conference here in DC in October. And finally, we always are looking for SHLB members. Just send me a note if you're interested, or Elle a note. You can see here if you're interested in learning more about our organization. So, Gary, what are we going to talk about? What questions do you have?
All right, so let's just start with the basics. So for any of our audience that's not totally immersed in E-Rate, can you explain E-Rate?
Absolutely. E-Rate helps schools and libraries literally pay the bills for their internet access. And the discount that a school or a library receives is based upon how many kids are eligible for school and reduced subsidized lunch in a district, right? That's the proxy for whether a community is affluent or not. So depending upon how many kids are eligible for subsidized lunch or free lunch, the discount that schools receive is up to 90%. So what does that mean? If a school district has an internet bill of $1,000 and they're a 90% school district, the federal government through E-Rate pays $900 of the bill every year.
So if I did the math on that, the economic benefit to all these, you said every congressional district across the country, to providing subsidies that allow every kid in school to have access to internet, to have Wi-Fi at their schools, previously have Wi-Fi in their buses. I mean, I would think that would have to, the math would show that that's a huge return on investment.
Enormous. And in fact, you're previewing something we're working on right now. So more to come on that this fall. But it's not even just education as you're describing. Think about all the industries, direct and indirect, that rely on internet being at a school. And I'm not just talking about an internet service provider, or I'm not talking just about a maker or a producer of fiber and all the widgets, right? All the technology around it. Modern buildings have a number of systems that require internet. So think about the security system. Think about HVAC. Think about the sprinkler system for the sports fields. Think about the communication systems within a building. All of these systems rely on the internet. You know, we met with Brendan Carr a couple of weeks ago. I was in with the superintendent, and he said, well, what would happen if you didn't have E-Rate? He said, well, we would still have internet, because how am I going to unlock the door to the front door of my school? That requires internet. How am I going to have a security camera that monitors who comes in and out? How am I going to how's a staff member going to badge in and out? Like, it needs internet. How am I going to turn on the air conditioning for a part of the building? It needs internet. So just think about all of the downstream impacts, economic impacts that this subsidy has. It's exponential.
And, you know, the other thing that we saw, especially during COVID, is that not everyone can afford internet at home or even has access. And so they have to come to the schools on nights and weekends to be able to do their homework. And I guess they could go to McDonald's or somewhere, but I mean, it's crazy. So one of the questions came in.
Gary, I'll say this, and that's particularly the libraries. You think about libraries. Exactly. That libraries are one of the only.
They all come to the library to be able to connect anybody, right?
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, because they can't. You know, if you're homeless, you might have a phone, but you don't have cell service, so you use the Wi-Fi on your phone to be able to communicate.
I mean, I would encourage you to spend an hour at a library. You will see everything under the sun. I was at a library in Texas a few months ago, and in the back was a group of 50 plus women that were learning Excel, right? And then you had a person come in and said, I don't even know how to turn on my cell phone. And then he had a digital literacy coordinator was explaining to somebody how to apply for VA benefits. Like, all of these things happen at a library, but they all need internet.
So one of the questions came in is, all right, what companies or what groups are behind the FCC's push to eliminate E-Rate? I mean, like, it seems like everybody benefits from E-Rate. So who's behind this?
That's a great, terrific question, because when you go up on the Hill, almost everybody supports E-Rates, right? There's widespread bipartisan support. The opposition to E-Rate is not coming from a particular industry, right? It's coming really two fronts. One is it's about limited government, right? There's a notion that this is somehow, entitlement or a handout, and the government shouldn't be doing it. But I think you were alluding to, Gary, not alluding to, you're explicitly saying the economic impacts and the benefits of providing internet to schools and libraries is pretty endless, right? And two, there is a discussion about screen time that's happening in this country, right? There's a concern that students, particularly children, are spending more time on screens. We at SHLB, we share that concern. I have a 6 and 9-year-old. I share that concern. But decisions about screen time and what kids are watching in school, they're meant for local school boards. They're meant for educators. They're not meant for the Federal Communication Commission. And as I said before, it's not as if a modern building can go without internet. Like, what modern building could operate, basic functions of a building operate without internet? So when you talk to a superintendent and ask, well, if E-Rate went away, what would you do? They would say, well, we would cut staff. We would cut other programming, because we need the internet to function. But screen time's a separate issue. We're dealing with that. And there's a lot of discussion, as you know, on a state and local level about it. But these two items are not connected at all.
Yeah, one of the comments, and I think this is super fair, it says McDonald's is 45 miles from our customers and our libraries are non-existent in our area with limited hours. So people do rely on connectivity at schools. I mean, I do a lot of whitewater kayaking in Polk County, Tennessee, and there is no internet. The Hardee's you can't even get on it. That's so bad, and the Dollar General is barely can do their point of sale. And so I go to the Polk County Library, which is a steel building. It's the saddest library you've ever seen, but at least it has like internet access. But it's like, it's kind of hard to participate in today's economy without having access.
Exactly.
So, all right, you're a Harvard-trained lawyer. It seems like you're well suited for kind of the litigation. So tell us, when you go down to New Orleans and how involved are you in the legal strategies and, with your experiences? It seems like you're just well suited for this particular job at this moment in time.
Thank you, Gary. Well, luckily, we have expert counsel at HWG who will be standing up in court and arguing on behalf of us. But we're their client. Shelby's their client, and we're representing schools and libraries and health clinics around the country. And so my next meeting, in fact, Gary, is with our counsel to talk about oral arguments next week. We bring a wealth, and our members bring a wealth of knowledge. 30 years of experience with this program. I think that's some of the head scratching that's going on here, right? We're part of the legal argument is proving that these are programs that have run well, right? And have been poked at and prodded at, and there have been countless proceedings at the FCC, and through countless rulemakings that go through the Administrative Procedures Act, we've landed where we are today, where E-Rate is this well-run program that the GAO recently gave a clean bill of health that is very, very, very well structured. We know what could be funded, how it's funded, who receives the benefits. All of this stuff has been honed over the years. So we feel pretty strong in our legal arguments when we go before the Fifth Circuit next week. So
if you kind of look at USF and E-Rate, is the crux of the problem the contribution? It seems like the rule of thumb is you want to, I'll call it tax, but you want contributions coming from the next big thing. And, with AI, things coming down the line, it seems like it would be very easy to peel off some money from something that's going and they're going to be accelerating exponential versus trying to, squeeze, having these ridiculous contribution rates as percentage from things that are dying.
Yes, and that's the conversation we want to have. And that's the conversation the Congressional Working Group wants to have. I don't want to be defending the very existence and the need for the program at the FCC. I want to be having a conversation with Congress and the FCC about how do you fix the contribution base. I agree with you. The contribution base is broken. We're only assessing a fee. We have a fee that's being assessed on telephony, and that base continues to shrink. So clearly we need to expand the base. You're talking about edge providers. That is something that we should be thinking about, how we do that. Broadband internet access. These are all places to assess in order to expand that base, to spread the pain or spread the burden, as they say, to ensure that all of these programs that rely on the Universal Service Program continue. Because as you're saying, these small amount of fees can have an enormous exponential impact, but we can't keep relying on a shrinking base to do so. So I agree with you. I want to have that conversation.
So you mentioned GAO. Just to shift gears a little bit, and this is on your track record. But so the GAO recently now has determined the BEAD program could be susceptible to fraud. And so the BEAD program continues to just be challenging. I'll use the word challenging. I have other words, but I'll use the word challenging. How did you put together the Treasury Capital Projects Fund? I think you had 4 people, and you deployed $10 billion, and all that money's at work, and it's building out these fiber network. I mean, and I don't think the GAO has cited any concerns about the capital projects, right? I mean, that is everything I've seen. That project was pretty flawless.
It starts with recognizing congressional intent. And congressional intent was putting states in the driver's seats. It was relying on the expertise of states to determine what best matched the needs in their state. And then you create guidelines, right, and goalposts and safeguards around it. And you say, okay, as long as you're within these guideposts, states go off and do good, right? It's recognizing that Washington doesn't know best. And the other thing that we did that I think was so important is creating predictable and certain rules and not changing course, right? Obviously, that's been a major a major complaint I know among state broadband offices is the rules or the guidelines have changed. And with us, you stick with a course. If states know the rules and providers know the rules and they're going to stay the same, people can work around them, build a business plan and implement. I think that's just so important. Certainty. You know that. You know business. Certainty is just so important.
Yeah. And again, I started off with saying that Capital Projects is the most successful government broadband program that I've ever seen in my several decades of working here. Is that a fair statement? I mean, I know I'm talking to the creator of that program, but
I mean, I'm obviously exceptionally biased. I will say it is a very successful program, extremely successful program that is responsible for connecting millions of Americans around the country, primarily with fiber broadband.
So it's not that hard if you set the framework correctly from the beginning.
That's right. Yeah. And then step out of the way. Isn't that part of the lesson here is that, and I like to say that, did some states do it a little differently than I personally would have done? Maybe, yes, but that's not for me to say as someone inside the Beltway. What Nebraska, what New York, what New Jersey, what North Dakota decide, they're the experts. And as long as it's within the guidelines, within the framework, as you say, let them go, let them flourish. And the results on aggregate will be so much better than if it was some centrally managed program.
All right, let's talk about AnchorNet. So your big conference coming up in October. So tell us a little bit, October 7th through 9th, I believe it is. And
yes.
What's going on there? Why should people come? What will they learn?
If you care about connecting anchors, right? If you care about the policy around it, the politics around it, and networking and sharing ideas and sharing stories, you should come to AnchorNets. It is a very powerful, important conference where we have some of the best minds in the business and stakeholders from around the country gather and talk about these particular issues. If you care about E-Rates, if you care about the rural healthcare program, but also if you care about BEAD and other programs, we're going to be discussing all of these over the course of 3 days.
Well, Joey, it's always a pleasure. I always love hanging out with you.
You as well.
Good luck and your briefings today on the Hill and next week and in New Orleans, hot sweat in New Orleans. I live near Savannah, so I know all about humidity.
Ooh, absolutely.
But I hope that y'all can get together with us again next week. We're going to have Roger Enter, the analyst and founder of Recon Analytics. And Recon just has an amazing panel of surveys. They just have so much data and really provide interesting things. And he's going to discuss how AI changes the telecom networks. So if you're interested in that, which I hopefully you are, please join me next week, and we will see what the survey says.